Today we're talking about a topic that mostly concerns Paladins, but not only Paladins. We're talking about Cards Unbound. Cards Unbound is something that affects Paladins directly, but also shows a bit of the current strategies that Hi-Rez in general has, where they're directing the game, and as such is something that I think is important to at least be aware of if you're interested in Paladins itself or you're just around for Smite basically. I am a bit of a Paladins player. I play it occasionally, just for fun, casually, whenever I don't feel like playing Smite and just, you know, want to blow off some steam or something. It's kind of a chill game to do that in. And I've been considering for a while to actually go into some Paladins content as well, which is why this is especially relevant for me. But with the latest update, I am not so sure anymore. The latest update is Cards Unbound. If you're out of the loop, Cards Unbound is an entire system overhaul for the card system behind Paladins. Beforehand, you could basically collect your cards, and then you could choose the level of the cards for your loadout, meaning if you want a certain aspect of your kit to be especially powerful, say a very strong cooldown reduction of like 40% plus on an ability, then you would have to put a lot of card points into that. But you'd only have to get the base card, and that was it. The new system gives every card levels, and these levels are not achieved by putting points into them. They're achieved by collecting the card multiple times. So you get the level 1 card from the start, you can use every card from the start, but if you want to have a better version of the card, then you'll have to collect those. There are multiple options to get those cards through chests. You could either get them through just like a mixed chest or a champion chest. And at the moment they're all still kind of free basically. You get them for playing and you get some for the first win of the day. But it is kind of indicated that Hi-Rez is thinking about making them buyable down the road. You buy them with gold, and somehow they said they might figure out a way for you to buy more cards that way. The outrage in the community regarding this was pretty high because it has a strong taste of pay to win, and no one wanted that. There was a lot of negative feedback. There was negative feedback from YouTube channels that were basically proposing what to play after Paladins, and note that this channel has like 700 subs or so it's not like this is a standard view account for that person. The reactions on the YouTube channel of Paladins itself have been terrible. If you look at all these downvotes right here, you'll see just how bad that has gotten. People are not happy there either. Reddit is full of comments of people that are not happy with the updates as well. They're either memeing it or complaining about it. And the Steam reviews have also gone down a fair bit. So is Paladins really a sinking ship? That is actually, interestingly enough, too early to say. If you look at the player base on Steam at the moment, it's actually higher than it's been for quite a while. It has dropped compared to what it used to be once. It used to be way higher a while ago, a few months ago. But at the moment, it's at least getting a bit more attention from people who want to try out the new changes, I would assume. We don't know if that will last and if people will actually like the changes or not. What is interesting is that this change was basically pushed through against a lot of negative feedback. There were multiple PTS rounds and it seemed like no one was happy with the result at any of the rounds and no one really saw the point. So really, that was just Hi-Rez's decision to go, we want to do this and that's how it's gonna be. Now, if you're from the Tribes Ascent or Global Agenda camp, then you'll be all like, I hate to say I told you so, but we knew that a long time ago. But I'm still on the fence about this being quite the same situation here. But let's look into this in depth and see if we have only downsides to it, if we can possibly find any upsides, and how bad the downsides are. Let's begin with the most obvious one. Because of the complaints, probably, there are multiple modes. There is a Siege Unbound mode and a Siege Classic Bound mode, where you only have the item level 4 of each card and no advantage through chests. So as such, there is already a difference there that you can find in how the player base is distributed, because before that, all of these players would be in the same mode. Siege Ranked exists in a same shape as the Bound mode, where you can only use ranked 4 cards, so the competitive playing field should be mostly even. That has certain downsides to it anyways, even though it sounds more like an upside. I will get to that later. What this all does, obviously, is splitting the player base. And also, Hi-Rez seems to be planning to announce further modes after this, more to be announced soon, and they also have the other Unbound modes on top of that, the Onslaught Unbound and the Payload Unbound. So overall, you will see a much more split player base. And if you think of a certain other Hi-Rez title that has the same thing in the same issue, that is usually not healthy for a game, because in the end it will mean that people are more spread across the game modes, That means longer queues in a single game mode, that means worse matchmaking at certain times, and all that kind of stuff that comes with it. So maybe not that advisable, maybe you should have learned from that in the past. Also, the next downside is rather minor, but it just annoyed me in hindsight. You get your gold after this patch, you get rewarded in that regard, your essence is translated into gold, but you do not get informed about champion chests unless you read up about them. So I spent all my gold on those normal chests instead of spending it on the champion chests for the champions that I'd like to play. And I kind of wasted a lot of cards that way that I'm probably never going to use. And to show you just how much of a waste it seems to be, let's look at this list that the Reddit user RJ-Tiger126 made. This person listed all the cards they got out of 159 basic Radiant chest rolls. And in the end, you will see that there are some level 6 items, one level 7 epic item, and that's pretty much about it. Everything else is like level 4 or level 5 and didn't progress past that point. And this player is level 132 and has 824 hours in Paladins. So you can imagine how insanely long it would take to actually try and get all cards to level 10. But that seems to be intended. Another issue is that apparently no champion chests are given out for levels that you've already reached with a champion. You would otherwise get a champion chest per level up with that particular champion. That's not happening. Maybe we get those later on the road, but for now it doesn't seem to be the case. Hi-Rez hasn't been completely ignorant to our feedback though. They have made a post, Hi-Rez Drew specifically, where he talked about basically a lot of these changes and what they're trying to achieve with them. Let's get into that. In regards to competitive, they want every player to get every card immediately. Yes, that is true, that is possible this way, and that wasn't the case before, but it wasn't really a long grind to get the cards that you need for your loadout either. There was always an easy way to get them if you're looking for a specific card for your loadout, so really I don't see the major benefit on it. The next one, balance becomes easier. Yes, that is also true, balance is easier when you have only one card level each, but the builds also become a lot more cookie cutter. It's a lot more likely that there's only be a 1 or 2 presets of cards that really have a big relevance, and the ones outside of that just fall off entirely. And yeah, you can try and buff those up, but then there's gonna be another one that falls out, and if you don't have the levels to adjust individually inside of that, it takes away customization in my opinion. Even though a later point here is that the consistent level allows for greater customization. That would only be true if all cards were equal for all loadouts, and that's pretty much impossible realistically, especially since we still have a decent amount of cards per character. Also, Stu states that previously certain cards weren't worth putting points into, and that's why these changes are made, where I'm thinking, well, if they weren't worth putting points into, then maybe just buff those cards instead of overhauling the entire system. For the casual side, some other points are made. Before the patch, progression was lacking, according to Hi-Rez, when it comes to the card system, because you'd quickly just get the cards you need and that was it. That's a point I can agree with, but at the same time I didn't feel like progression in the cards was necessary. You had your player levels, you had the rewards that way, and you also had the in-game progression per round, so I felt like there was plenty of a progression feeling to begin with. Instead, Hi-Rez now proposes that there will be fun through nearly endless progression in the new system where you level up the cards, which are not meant to be bought for gold, but daily quests instead. Now, let's be real. You may want that to be the case, but it's not what it is. The first posts of people putting all their gold into chests for their mains have already popped up, and those have completely stacked characters. As such, they didn't really have to grind much for it past this point. They already had everything they needed. They spent that all on these characters, and those characters are just loaded, and every other character they would play is completely weak in comparison. All that really does is people being more locked into their main character, because that's the one they have the card points for, rather than being able to expand their horizon and try out different characters. Suddenly you will have a lot of people refusing to play a role that is needed for your team, if they didn't already do that before, because they don't have the stacked card loadout for them. That's just annoying, that's not a benefit. Stu then proposes that there's more diversity of play through using cards you wouldn't normally use because they're leveled up, which I think is a major downside if anything. Why would I want to use cards that I normally wouldn't want to use because I don't like them, because I want to use other cards instead, just because they're better? It would be really annoying if I, for example, get a card for really strong healing on a character that does a bit of healing, and I don't really want to prioritize a healing kind of playstyle, but rather want to go for damage, but I should go into healing because my damage card is not as leveled up, so it's less efficient. That's just obnoxious. That's not a feature, that's annoying. And last but not least, as mentioned before, more modes to play are announced, which is not really a good idea if you want to not split your player base even more as you already did with the new system. And here's the thing, for me personally, collecting cards before was fun. Yes, it didn't last forever because eventually you'd have most of the cards that you need, but you know, rolling a new card and being like, oh nice, I didn't have that one yet, let's see what that does, that was interesting. Way more interesting than, oh I have all the cards, but this is now slightly stronger than beforehand in this one particular mode that I probably don't even want to play. Also, when trying to create loadouts at the moment, there is no way to see your level 4 cards. This will hopefully be introduced at a later point, but this is clearly indicating to me that the game overall, especially on its casual side, is currently designed for the unbound mode. And that is something that I find really awkward. At least give us an option to see what a loadout in a competitive setting would look like. I don't want to have to do the math for every single card that I put into my loadout. And that brings us to one of the biggest issues that I think the new system has. You previously had the chance to fully max out one card in competitive. And for certain cards, it only made sense to use them when they were maxed out. You, for example, get a 100% reset on something. That is something you can use right away in a fighting situation, but if you have a 40% reset, that's not gonna cut it. And in certain things, you just can't go over 100%. If it's a cooldown reset, it's a cooldown reset. So if we have a card that is at rank 4 at 100% cooldown reset, then everything above that would be pointless. So you cannot put that card on 100% cooldown reset at level 4. That means that you can never have a 100% cooldown reset in the competitive version of the game modes. Because if you did, then the same card would no longer function in the unbound mode, because really no one would want to invest anything into getting it past rank 4. And this is the flaw that I think hasn't really been addressed enough yet. Coach Bitey, who was previously kinda concerned about the changes, actually made a Reddit post where he explained that the bound mode is now the best way to practice for competitive, and as long as everyone just keeps playing bound mode, we'll be fine, and the few cash cows basically who want to play the unbound mode should do so, but they won't really practice for competitive, it's whatever, it's just a complete casual mode. But even if we take it as such, that still doesn't fix the issue of the card levels. You could possibly make it in a way where everyone gets card rank 10 of every card in the competitive or in the bound mode, but that would make it completely ridiculous in most scenarios as well. So that can't be it. And before we conclude this, a quick side note. There are also issues in Paladins with the quests at the moment apparently, and there are issues with the graphics that I've personally experienced a decent amount. So just on top of that, Paladins also has some other flaws that have been appearing more and more that weren't as present previously, and I think that's something that should be more the focus and that should be the energy invested into. But let's conclude this here before I start rambling. We saw a change to Paladins that is most likely geared at a more pay-to-win structured casual mode, with the competitive mode staying the same. A change that was only explained after a lot of backlash and not given much feedback time, much time to balance it out with the community, but rather kind of forced onto them. And that's the most important part here. This change went through against the entire player base's opposition from what we could have seen. There weren't any people that I could find that were actually like, yes, I really want these changes. I think they benefit Paladins in its current state. It actually kind of resembles net neutrality in a way where they also had a kind of completely opposing opinion from everyone and still went through with it. And it also happened around the same time as the whole EA thing. So really not the best thing you can do for the image of a company or of a game, and something that I think should have been a lot more communicated, a lot more back and forth with the community in order to make sure that they're comfortable with the changes, whether they agree or not. What happens with Paladins in the future highly depends on how quickly the changes get adjusted and how many people actually care about them in the end, out of those who are not vocal about them. I personally probably will wait a few weeks or months, depending on how long it takes, until the card system is a bit more ironed out, a little bit more balanced again, so it makes more sense to play it than it does at the moment, because really I don't feel like playing a test version of the game on the live client. I hope those changes get sorted out eventually, because I still have some theory crafting stuff that I want to do with Paladins, where Cred thankfully provided me with some data, and I really want to use that, and I just want it to be worth the effort that I want to put into it. With that, thank you guys for watching. I hope you found this interesting or insightful. If you're new to the channel, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell. It really helps me out and gives you the chance to win codes in the description sometimes. See you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth out. So I actually figured out my demonetization issue and it was my outro. As such, feel free to click any of the links around here right now. There will be new outro music as soon as I find something nice. Until then, as you guys requested, I will do the outro music myself. You're welcome.